Hello and welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about reading goals today. I planned to do a quarter year check-in, but then that didn't happen. Then I thought I'd do a check-in at the end of April, and here we are in the middle of May. So I wanted to do a check-in for my reading goals of 2023, see how I did, if I am on track, if there is something I need to be focusing on. I have a feeling I'm doing pretty well with my goals, but let's see. And then at the end of the video I will talk about my favorite books of the year so far, so stay tuned for that. I have my notebook here where I keep track of all my goals. So the first goal I had was the number of books I wanted to read this year, which I set at 52. I usually read more in a year, and this is more sort of a minimum I want to read. And so far I have read 39 books, so absolutely nailing that goal. Storygraph says I am 21 books ahead right now, and if I keep up like this I will probably get to over 100 books read at the end of the year. But yeah, I wasn't really expecting to be behind on this goal anyway, so no surprises there. Next is the Feminist Reading Challenge, and this has 23 prompts. So to be on track I should have read 8 prompts, and I've done 11, so I am on track. I have read a book from Japan, and I've read Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto for that, a graphic non-fiction work. That was Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. I've read Too Much Slip by Melissa Lukashenko for a writer from Oceania. I've read Do Het Toch Maar by Bob Schons for poetry by women of color. For a book on mental health I've read The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. For a queer love story I've read Fair Play by Tove Jansson. I've read The English Understanding War by Helen DeWitt for a book under 150 pages. I've read The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filia for a short story collection. A Bird's Away by Jennifer Ackerman for a book about nature. I've read The Street by Anne Patry for a book published by a female writer before 1980. And I have read The Transgender Issue by Sean Fay for a book by a trans author or a book with trans representation. So 11 prompts for that, so doing very well on that goal. I'm also doing the Montana Book Company Reading Challenge, and that one has 29 prompts. So I need to have read about 9 or 10 books to be on track, and for that I have read 12, so on track for that one as well. So far I have done a book by a trans author, which was the same goal in the Feminist Reading Challenge. I've read a novel written from a perspective of an animal. For that I read Snow Dog Food by Claudia Morandini. I read a book recommended by one of my favorite authors, and for that I read Where Angels Feed to Thread by E.M. Forster, which was recommended by Carson McCullers. Read a book with an ace character. For that I read The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. I read a band or challenge book, for which I read Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. Read a book of poetry by a new to you poet, and I've read Do Het Toch Maar by Bob Schons. A non-fiction about the natural world was The Bird Way by Jennifer Ackerman. I read Hitting a Straight Leg with a Crooked Stick by Zora Neale Hurston for a book from the Harlem Renaissance. I read a book by a female philosopher, and that was Middlemarch by George Eliot. I read a memoir in essays, which was Small Bodies of Water by Ninya Minya Pauwels. Crying in H Mart was a book about food. Too Much Lip was a book by an Indigenous author, and lastly I've read a true crime book, and for that I've read Sandadia by Peter Huybrechts. So yeah, as you can hear, there are some double ups. Some books will work for more than one challenge, so I will count them for more challenges. And then for some of the prompts I will have read more books that will fit the prompt, but I've just wrote down the first book I've read that will fit the prompt. I also wanted to read 15 books of my 40 before 40 list, which is a list of 40 books I want to read before I turn 40 in about 2.5 years. These are all backlist books and classics that keep on popping up on my radar that I want to read but just haven't read yet. And I've read 5 of them so far, so I'm right on track on that goal. And those are Middlemarch by George Eliot, The Street by Anne Petrie, Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis. Next, I wanted to read 10 new countries to an ongoing challenge where I read a book from every country. I've started tracking this about 2 years ago, so I have read some of these countries before that. I'm just not counting them to this particular challenge. And so I wanted to add 10 new countries this year, and so far I've added 6. I've read a book from Italy, I've read a book from Tanzania, New Zealand, the Virgin Islands, Finland and Uruguay. And then last, for reading challenges, I wanted to add 10 books from different years to a challenge where I read a book from every year between 1900 and 2020. And this is the only one where I am behind because I only added 2 because I read Where Angels Feed to Thread, that was from 1905, and then Fair Play by Tove Jansson was from 1982. So that is like the only reading goal I am behind on, and I need to focus a bit more on that. So yeah, those were the reading challenges, and then I had 2 BookTube goals, which was more sort of events I wanted to participate in. The first was the BookTube prize, and in my goals video I didn't really specify in what capacity I wanted to join in. I said I wanted to join in with the first round and then see how it went, and I did do that. I judged in the first round, and right now the second round or the quarterfinals are going on, but I'm taking a break from that, and then I think I will jump back in with the semi-final. But for me, I can check off that goal because I said I wanted to participate, and I did, and I had a great time, so I would say it was a success. I also said I wanted to join in with the E.M. Forster read-along that Jandy Librarian is hosting this year. I did read the first book, but I haven't read any of the other books so far. I just noticed that I'm not very interested in picking up the same author every month or so quickly after one another. I might join in with some of the other books later in the year, but just have a more casual approach. And then lastly, I wanted to reduce my TBR back to 50 books this year, which is sort of my sweet spot. I had, I think, 70 books at the start of the year, and my idea was to reduce it by 3 books every month, because that would give me some wiggle room around my birthday when I always like to do a big book haul. I am on 57 books right now, so also right on track for that one. I love that I didn't have to do a book buying ban for this. I still bought plenty of books. I just read a lot as well, and I DNF books and unhauled a bunch of books too. So yeah, reduced my TBR by 13 books by the end of April. So yeah, all in all, I'm doing pretty well on my goals. I think it will slow down a bit now because, especially with like the Feminist Reading Challenge and the Montana Book Club Challenge, the prompts I've done by now are the books that were already on my TBR anyway. So So now we're getting more to the problems where I have to actively seek out books for. So it will start to get a bit more difficult. But for now, well done me, keep up the good work. So now let's move on to the best part of the video, I think. Honestly, I wouldn't blame you if we skipped straight to this part. Who cares about goals anyway? I think it was Karen who mentioned in a video a while ago that she loved to hear about people's favorite books of the year so far early on in the year, because then she could already start looking up those books and didn't have to wait until the end of the year. So if you are looking for some great books to read, look no further. I have 7 books to talk about today, and I'm gonna go through them pretty quickly. I think I will start with the Transgender Issue by Shon Faye. This is the only non-fiction book I have on here, and in this the author talks about the issues that transgender people face. It's kind of in the title. The mainstream media will have you believe that these issues consist of large part of correct pronouns and which bathroom to use, but obviously they are a lot broader and more complex than that, and the author shows how it connects with issues that the broader society face, such as racism, capitalism, misogyny, classism, which makes this book very insightful. The rest are all non-fiction books. I haven't put them in any particular order, they're just how I've grabbed them from the shelves. So we have Con Todas by Carolina de Robertis. This is a book set in 1970s Uruguay, when the country is living under a brutal military government. We meet this group of 5 women who are all from very different backgrounds, but they are all lesbians, and it is dangerous for them to be their authentic selves. They find a little house on a peninsula where they sort of create this sanctuary for themselves, a retreat where they can be their authentic selves and not think about daily life for a while. And we follow these women for the next 30 years or so, where they fall in love, they make friendships, they fight, and they just live their lives. It's a book that's very dark and very sad in some places, but in essence it's about love and community and female empowerment. And then talking about sad and dark books, next is The Street by Anne Patry. This is a modern classic written in 1946, and where Con Todas was dark and sad, it was also uplifting. This is just miserable. So if you are looking for a book from Misery Bay, you can pick this one up. This is about a young woman with an 8-year-old son. She has just separated from her husband, and she has to try and make a life for herself. And she very much believes in the American dream, that if she just works hard and is determined, she can begin again and make a life for herself and her son. So at the beginning of this book, they move into this really old crumbling tenement building in Harlem in New York, because that's all she can afford right now. And she begins to find out that this American dream is not something she will ever achieve. This book just perfectly illustrates how difficult it is to break the cycle of poverty and racism. I really like the writing in this. It's what I call a book for the senses. The way Anne Patry describes the apartment they live in, how it traps the heat, the street is mentioned in the title, the people who live there. It's all very, very vivid. It also has one of the most creepy characters I have ever read in a book. every time I read from his perspective, the hairs on the back of my neck would just stand up. He was just so creepy. So yeah, a very miserable book, but still very well written, and really points out some problems and issues in society that are still very relevant today. Then we have Fair Play by Tove Jansson. This was translated from the Swedish by Thomas Thiel, and this is about two 70-year-old women who are in a relationship with each other but are also very independent from each other. And this is just a book about them living their lives and making art. These are all short stories or vignettes of sort of slice of life anecdotes. I think Tove Jansson is doing what she does best in this book, which is writing stories that at first glance are not really about anything at all, or just sort of very trivial things, but always have this extra layer and a bigger meaning between the lines, and are about finding beauty and art in day-to-day things. So yeah, a really short gem of a novel. Next is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which is a lot more action-packed than Fair Play, but that is not why I love this book. This is a sci-fi novel set on a spaceship, and plot-wise the crew on this spaceship has some sort of mission, but I can't remember the exact details. Something about punching holes through space to create like roads and ways between planets. Doesn't really matter because that's not why I love this book anyway. What I loved was the characters and the found family aspect of this random group of people and other alien species who are forced to live together and rely on each other, and form this really strong bond together. And I love how the sci-fi aspect of this book is used to explore different types of sexuality and gender, and different ways to build relationships and communities. I think, like in Cantoras, this is a book where the characters will just stay with me for a very long time. Then we have a short story collection, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filya. This is a collection of, I think, nine stories, all about black girls and women who are all involved in church life, whether directly or indirectly. And these stories all explore an element of their lives that is hidden and separated from the church and secret, but also very much a part where they can be themselves and sort of explore a hidden aspect of themselves. I think all these stories are great, which in itself is a good sign for a good collection when there aren't any dots in the book. And I love how the author has managed to create such complex, memorable characters in such a short amount of time. And then lastly we have The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, which was my #1 in the first round of the BookTube Prize. This novel is based on the life of Lucrezia de Medici. She is a 16-year-old girl who has just married a very important rich nobleman in 16th century Italy. And the book starts when she and her husband travel to the country house, and she is just absolutely certain that her husband will murder her. We then go back in time where we meet Lucrezia as a young girl, growing up, then when she met her husband and their marriage, and then we alternate chapters going back in time until now, and then the events in the country house. This was a book that was just gripping from the start. The writing is very lush, which I think fitted the story. This is a story of two very wealthy families, and the descriptions of the palaces and the houses, the rich food, the detailed fabrics and clothing, they are overwhelming and almost suffocating, and it just adds to this sense of doom that is present throughout this entire book. That this was just enthralling beginning to end. So yeah, these are my favorite books of the year so far. 7 books that I can highly recommend. I would love for you to pick up one or more of these books. So let me know if you do, or if you have already read any of these books. I would also love to know how you're doing on your reading goals. Are you on track? Are you behind? Do you still stand behind your goals, or have you found anything new you want to concentrate on this year? If you have any other questions or comments, just leave them down below or just say hello. I always like hearing from you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.